Namo Buddhaya. Good evening. Welcome to the Buddha Dhamma TV. My name is Lisa Chu. We begin our program with a life story of an enlightened disciple of the Buddha. The value of learning about Venerable Sariputta, the enlightened disciple of Gautama Buddha, lies in his embodiment of wisdom, compassion, and exemplary discipleship. Venerable Sariputta was known for his deep understanding of the Dhamma, Buddha's teaching, and his ability to communicate complex teachings in simple, accessible ways. Studying his life and character can inspire devotion, self-control, and a strong sense of morality. His journey shows how diligence, humility, and patience can lead to spiritual awakening and inner peace. Now, here is Venerable Anandajoti of England to present the fascinating life story of the Arahat Sariputta. We appeal to you for patiently listening to his wonderful life story.
So tonight's events concern very especially Venerable Sariputta. So I'm going to tell you Venerable Sariputta's story. Okay. And also it concerns Venerable Moggallana. As you know, because we've pointed out before, the one behind me, standing on the right of Lord Buddha, is Venerable Sariputta, and the one on the Buddha's left is Venerable Moggallana. If you go into Mahayana temple, you see two different statues. Those are the statues of Ananda and Mahakassapa. Okay, so in the Mahayana, the important lineage goes through Mahakassapa to Ananda and then down through the ages until it comes to the Zen masters. So they have those two disciples. But in the Theravada, the disciples that are called the chief disciples of the Lord Buddha are Venerable Sariputta and Venerable Moggallana. Now, an important thing about this is that you don't just happen to become one of the Lord Buddha's chief disciples. For one thing, you must practice for a much longer period than a normal disciple. Yeah? And for another thing, you must make an aspiration. I think you all know that Lord Buddha, when he was in his life as Sumedha, he made the aspiration to become a Buddha in his later life. Yeah, and then the Buddha, Dipankara at that time, Buddha Dipankara confirmed that commitment and said that it would come true in a future life. So Lord Buddha was going through samsara for what is said 4 immeasurables and 100,000 aeons. To become a chief disciple, you also must practice for an extremely long time, but it's not as long as for a Buddha, of course, but it's for 1 immeasurable and for 100,000 aeons. So it's a long, long time that you're practicing in samsara to attain that position. So it's not as far back as the Lord Buddha, who made his vow under Dipankara, under the Buddha Dipankara. It's under a later Buddha. There are 28 Buddhas, yeah. Venerable Dipankara was the 4th of the 28 Buddhas. So the 10th of those 28 was called Anomadasi. Okay, so this is happening during the Buddha Anomadasi's time. And at that time, there were 2 people were born. They're called Sarada and Siriwadana. And they were born in Jambudipa, which we now call India, but Jambudvipa, it just means the area where civilization is occurring, really. You can take it like that. Civilization doesn't only occur, of course, in India. Yeah. So we have civilizations in other places as well. But it's what was really the known world. So we can say that Jambudvipa was within the known world, a civilized world though, not a backward world or not a low world or anything like that, but something that was at a state of advance. So something that happened to Sumedha, that was the Lord Buddha in his early incarnation, is he saw his father die, and he realized, first of all, that his father couldn't take anything with him. And he realized from that, he inferred that he also could not take anything with him. So a similar sort of thing happened to Sarada. His father died also. And then he realized that he cannot take all the wealth of the family with him. He's going to die also, and that will all be lost. The only thing that he's going to be able to take with him are the good and the bad deeds that he's done throughout his life. So he decided to go forth and to try to seek liberation. So he distributed his wealth. Many times in these stories it tells about how this was done. You know, enormous amounts of wealth had been gathered, but he distributed it to all the poor people and to all the people throughout the city and throughout the country. And it was difficult to get rid of all the money. Yeah, difficult to distribute the wealth. There was so much wealth accumulated. But he distributed all the wealth to the poor people, the people who were in need, and he went forth. And he gained many disciples. In fact, he got, through his spiritual practice at that time, he attained the 5 abhinya. The 5 abhinya are the 5 deep knowledges, the 5 very great spiritual powers. And he also attained the 8 jhana. The 6th abhinya is actually when you attain awakening. So he didn't attain awakening at that point, but he had attained the other 5 abhinya, and he'd attained the 8 jhana. And at that time, the Buddha Anomadasi had arisen in the world, and Sarada and his disciples, it said that he had 74,000 disciples. He was a very great spiritual master with, you know, he's already got the 5 abhinya, he's already got the 8 jhanas and everything. So he had a lot of disciples. He decided to go and meet the Buddha Anomadasi and pay his respects. So he did that, and the Buddha, seeing him coming and knowing his potential, so the Buddhas have this ability to understand the potential of the people who they come in contact with. It's a very important ability that they have, because they can look at whoever it is, they look at one person, yeah, and they know exactly what is right for that person, yeah, or how they will be able to respond. So the Buddha asked one of his chief disciples, all the Buddhas have chief disciples, yeah? So the Buddha Anomadasi asked one of his chief disciples to give a talk on Dhamma. And he gave like a great talk on Dhamma, and Sarada was inspired by it. And he, at that time, all of his disciples attained arahatship. Yeah, 74,000 of them, they all attained arahatship, which means, of course, that they're not going to be born again. That was their last life. But Sarada, although he was the leader, he didn't attain arahatship. And the reason was because he had made in his mind this aspiration to become like the chief disciple that he'd seen doing this preaching, stood on the right-hand side of the Buddha. Okay? And then the Buddha Anomadasi confirmed it. So this is also another important point and an important difference between the Theravada and the Mahayana. If you become a bodhisattva, or you make an aspiration to be a chief disciple, or to be a great disciple in some way or other, it has to be confirmed. You can't just simply become a bodhisattva, just in front of your teacher. It's not sufficient. You must make the aspiration in front of a Buddha, and the Buddha must confirm it. Okay. So Sarada made his aspiration, and the Buddha confirmed it, and then he went and found his friend Siriwadana, and who was not ordained at that time. But he called Siriwadana to come and meet the Buddha, because there was this kind of heart connection, you can say, between them. Yeah, they had been good friends growing up and everything like this, and they wanted to, wanted the best for each other. So he called Siriwadana, and then Siriwadana made the aspiration for being the disciple who would stand on the left-hand side of Lord Buddha. They always tell the previous lives, you see, because it's an important point, that we don't have just one life. The reason we're here now, in the situation we're in now, is because we had previous lives and we made certain deeds in those lives, good deeds and bad deeds also, and we're now experiencing, partially anyway, experiencing the fruit of those actions. It means for most of us, of course, that we did good things. If you don't do good things, you will get a rebirth in the animal realm or in one of the lower realms. People who have done a mixture of good and bad deeds, they get reborn in the human realm. People who only do good deeds but don't attain liberation are likely to get reborn in the Deva realms. People who do good deeds and can attain high levels of jhana, that means they've really developed their minds to a high extent, they get reborn in the Brahma realms. Okay, so that's the way that the births and rebirths work out. So the best place, though, to get reborn is always said to be in the human realm, because it's in an ambiguous situation. There's enough suffering to keep you on your toes, and also, there's not too much pleasure, you see. If you're just blissed out all day and all night, year in, year out, you don't make the effort. On the other hand, if you're suffering too much in lower realms, you also can't make very much effort to attain liberation. So the human realm is a good realm to be born in, and that way you can hear, especially if you get reborn at the time that the Lord Buddha's teaching is in, is still available. So now it is, yeah. The period when the Lord Buddha's teaching, even though there's many Lord Buddhas who are born, the periods when the Lord Buddha's teaching is available is very, very small. And the period when it's not available is very, very long. So you should also think about that, because not only have you got a human birth, at the moment, but you've also got it at a time when the Lord Buddha's teaching is available, and you can get proper instruction and make good steps along the path. Maybe you don't attain liberation, but you certainly will, if you follow the teaching, you'll certainly be making good steps along the path, and it will set you up rightly for your next life. Sarada and Siriwadana, they carried on being reborn and reborn and reborn, doing good deeds during this long, long period, one immeasurable and 100,000 aeons, such a long, long time, really. And then in Lord Buddha's time, that means our Lord Buddha's time, Gautama Buddha, they were reborn before Lord Buddha was born. And the Venerable we now call Sariputta. The reason we call him Sariputta is because he was born to Rupasari. His mother was called Rupasari, so he was called Sari's son, Sariputta, and that's how he became known. But in childhood he was called Upatissa, but we'll call him Sariputta so we don't get confused with too many names. Okay, and same with Siriwadana. He was reborn, he became Kolita, but later he was known by his clan name, which was Moggallana. And as that's a clan name, like Ku or whatever, because it's a clan name, he was called Mahamoggallana. It means the great Moggallana, to distinguish him from all the other Moggallanas, you see. So they were reborn, and they were again very rich in their last life, and they used to attend to festivals every year, and they would go to the festivals, and there would be a big show, but like they would put on in the old days, where the whole village would come out, and attend the festivals, and then there would be dancing and singing, and there would be prizes given, and so on and so forth. So Upatissa and Kolita would be the two people who would give the prizes, because they were the rich people in the village. Yeah, but they attended these festivals year in and year out. But one time they attended it. It was a 3-day festival. On the first day of the festival, they were really enjoying themselves. On the second day of the festival, they were really enjoying themselves, laughing when jokes were cracked, and crying when, they told sad stories and so on. But one day, that's on the third day, they got fed up with it, or they got bored with it, or they got, they saw through it, that it's not kind of really very satisfactory. Okay, so they decided there and then, on the spot, to go forth. At that time, as you might remember from the teachings in the Tripitaka, there were 6 famous teachers about at the same time that Lord Buddha was about. So one of those was called Sanjaya. So Sanjaya at that time was in Rajagaha. Yeah. And so this is before Lord Buddha had attained awakening. Okay. So they decided to go to Sanjaya and learn from Sanjaya. Sanjaya was what we say a parivajika, a wanderer. It's one of the samana groups. I was talking the one talk not so long ago, talking about the difference between the Shramana groups and the Brahmana groups. The Shramana groups were the ascetic groups. So Sanjaya, and in fact all 6 teachers were all Samana, from the Samana fold. So they went to him and they learned the teaching from him, and they became very adept in the teaching, and they gained very many disciples. They had 250 disciples, right? But it didn't lead to awakening. So they made a kind of pact together that if at any time one or the other would be able to find somebody whereby they could attain awakening or find the path to liberation, then the first one would tell the second one about it. Yeah. So this is, you see, it's kind of prefigured in their earlier life. Yeah. Where Sarada met the Buddha, and then he went and brought Siriwadana. Yeah. So that was like a prefigurement of what was going to happen in their last life. So one day, after the Lord Buddha had attained awakening, the Lord Buddha, after 2 months, he went to Isipatana, and then he gave the first teaching, yeah. And during that Wasana, that rains retreat, he also taught the people who came out from Benares, that means the Yasa and his 54 companions, and they all attained arahatship. And he sent them out in different directions to go and give the teaching to various, within the communities. And the Buddha himself came back over to Gaya, not Bodh Gaya. It's slightly just like 10 kilometers north of Bodh Gaya, which is where he had attained awakening. But he came to Gaya, and there he met the 3 Kassapa brothers and their 1,000 disciples. They were matted-haired ascetics, actually from the Brahmana group, not from the Samana group. But he converted them through a show of miraculous power. He managed to convert them, and then he remembered his promise. He had made a promise while he was still a bodhisattva that if he ever attained awakening, that he would go back to Rajagaha and he would teach King Bimbisara. Yeah. So he remembered this promise that he had made, and Gaya to Rajagaha is not so far actually. So he took the disciples, that's the 1,000 disciples, and he went to Rajagaha with them, and then he met and gave teachings to King Bimbisara. That was on the new moon day before this full moon. Yeah, just like 2 weeks ago, but 2,600 years ago. Okay, so it was 2 weeks before. And his disciples, of course, the Lord Buddha's disciples, would go out into Rajagaha on Pindapat, for Pindapat. And they were out one day, and one of them, called Asaji, was walking through the town. Now there's a way that you should go when you go for Pindapat. You keep your eyes down like this, and you walk in a very composed way, with the robe over both your shoulders, with the bowl held like this, and you walk very calmly, and you don't look around, or flap your arms, or get involved, or anything like that. You just look down enough to be able to see where you're going, so you don't fall over or anything like that, or bump into anybody. But you just look down in front of you and you walk. Upatissa, who was Sariputta to become, Upatissa saw Asaji walking through Rajagaha, yeah, and he was very impressed. And this is also, I think, an interesting thing, because if you see a monk who is very well composed, it can be very inspiring, you know. It can be really uplifting to see it, because mainly people are kind of thrown about by the sense objects and everything like this. But you see a monk who is concentrated, calm, and just going about his business, you know, without being blown this way or that way, then it can be very inspiring. So Sariputta was very inspired by Asaji, and then he asked Asaji who was his teacher and what was his teaching. And then Asaji gave this teaching, and it became a very important teaching. It's just one sloka. What it means is, whatever things have a cause and source, their cause the realized one has told, and also that which is their cessation. Such is the great ascetic's doctrine. Whatever has a cause and a source, the cause has been told by the gracious one, by the realized one. Yeah. That means the arising of suffering. That's the important cause that we need to know. Yeah. And then also its cessation, how things come to cease, how suffering comes to cease. That also the great ascetic had taught. So this became, when Sariputta, it said when Sariputta heard this, at the first two lines he attained path, and the second two lines he attained fruit. That means he became Sotapanna. So he immediately entered the stream and became one on the way to liberation. Now this teaching actually became very important, because it became like an icon of the teaching, and you will find it in inscriptions throughout India, throughout Southeast Asia also. In fact, you can also find it in Malaysia from old times, like the 5th century and 6th century, like this sort of period. They would inscribe this, and it was like a Dhamma relic. So you have Buddha relics, and you have Dhamma relics, yeah? And you also have Missa relics. It means like things that the Lord Buddha was in contact with. So the Bodhi tree, the Lord Buddha was in contact with. It's a material relic coming down from Lord Buddha. The Dhamma relic is another thing. So this teaching, this short teaching, became like a summary of the teaching that the Lord Buddha had given, and it was often put, if they didn't have relics, bodily relics of the Lord Buddha or of Arahants, they would write these words on a manuscript, and they would put the manuscript in the chaitya. Yeah? And then you had a chaitya must have a relic, you see. So the chaitya would have a Dhamma relic. Many times when they open chaityas now and they find what's inside, one of the things you'll find is this verse. It became such an important verse during the Middle Ages. Anyway, Sariputta attained Sotapanna, so he remembered about his friend Kolita, and he went to tell Kolita that he'd found the path that was going to lead to liberation. Yeah. So they had made this pact, so this was the fulfillment of this pact. And so he told the Gata also to Kolita, and Kolita also attained Sotapanna. Yeah. It seems in a way quite extraordinary that somebody would attain so high a state on so small a teaching. Yeah. But in fact, at the time, it was quite a revolution in thought. The Buddha started teaching conditionality. Yeah. Now these days, we take conditionality for granted. Yeah. We live in a scientific environment, in a scientific ethos, if you like. Yeah. But in Lord Buddha's time, that was certainly not the case. When you read the scriptures of other, like the Vedic scriptures and so on and so forth, they're very much in a magical universe. Yeah. They live in a universe where there are correspondences. So they say things, they used to make the horse sacrifice. And the horse sacrifice is the sacrifice of the universe. Yeah? And parts of the horse represent parts of the universe. It seems very odd to us now that the eye of a horse, is somehow intimately connected with the sun. We don't see the connection. Yeah? Because our ethos is a different ethos. We are living in a world of conditionality. We understand that teaching. But the first person who ever gave that teaching is actually Lord Buddha. And it's really a breakthrough in the way that people were looking at things. Yeah. But the Lord Buddha started teaching conditionality. So conditionality was really a breakthrough in human thought at the time, And I think it had that effect, really, when Asaji gave this short teaching, and Sariputta understood things arise for a reason, and they pass away for a reason. It's actually a breakthrough in the way you look at the world. And, he attained perhaps a great faith in the teaching, and he also broke through to Sotapanna. The two of them went to their teacher, Sanjaya, because you owe something to your teacher. Yeah. So they went to Sanjaya, and they told them about the teaching that they'd found that would lead to liberation. But Sanjaya wouldn't accept the teaching. You see, Sanjaya was probably given the same teaching, yeah, but he didn't accept it, yeah. He couldn't accept it, so he didn't follow them. But their followers, 250 followers, they went to Lord Buddha with Sariputta and Moggallana, and then they heard the teaching a bit more in depth that was given on that night, and all 250 attained arahatship on that very night. That's the new moon night before this full moon night. Yeah. But Sariputta and Moggallana did not attain to arahatship, and that's because they were practicing for the chief discipleship. So it takes more to go, they have to get a deeper knowledge, a deeper practice has to go into it. So it said that Moggallana practiced for a week and listened to the teachings and practiced for a week, and then he attained arahatship. Sariputta, because he was becoming the right-hand disciple, and the disciple of great wisdom. That's the disciple who has the Patisambhida. If you remember in the chanting just now, we were chanting the Patisambhida, the Patisambhida jnana, because he was practicing for these high and deep knowledges. He took 2 weeks, and he attained awakening, on Magha full moon night. So this is the night that we remember Venerable Sariputta attaining awakening. So it's a very important thing. And then something very something else happened that night, which was spontaneously, without being called, all the disciples that had followed the Lord Buddha from Rajagaha, that means the previous 1,000 matted hair disciples, and all of Sariputta and Moggallana's disciples, and Moggallana and Sariputta themselves, they all gathered around Lord Buddha in the Veluvana in Rajagaha. So there was this great assembly of 1,250 arahats who all assembled spontaneously around Lord Buddha. And the Lord Buddha gave the Ovada Patimokkha. I think you know it, Sabbapapassa akaranan kusalasu pasampada Sachittapariyodapanan etan buddhana sasanan. Not doing any bad deeds, only doing good deeds and purifying one's mind. This is the teaching of the Buddhas, not of the Buddha, of the Buddhas. All the Buddhas gave this teaching. It's known as the Ovada Patimokkha. And this, before the Patimokkha that we now recite was recited, this was the only thing that would be recited. They would gather, the Sangha would gather around Lord Buddha, and he would just recite actually 3 verses. I just gave the 1 verse there, but there's 3 verses. So he would recite these 3 verses. It's about how samanas should behave, and about doing good deeds and purifying the mind and so on. For the first 20 years of the sasana, in this sasana, then this is all that was chanted at the Uposita day. They would gather around Lord Buddha, and he would just chant these 3 verses, and that would be instruction enough for the Sangha. Now in some previous Buddhas' lives, this was the only Patimokkha that was ever given. Throughout their lives, some of the Buddhas would only chant it once every 7 years. It would be sufficient for the Sangha to hear it once every 7 years, and they would go away and practice. Others 6 years, others 1 year, some chanted only 6 months. But many of the Buddhas only gave those teachings for discipline. Our Lord Buddha, after 20 years, started laying down the rules for the monks. And that was to ensure that the sasana would last for a long time. So then they started the chanting of the Patimokkha, which is what is done on the Uposita days by the Sangha. But it's only after 20 years. That same night, then the Lord Buddha turned to the Sangha, and he pointed out Venerable Sariputta and Venerable Moggallana, and he said that they would become his chief disciples. In a way, it's quite remarkable, because they had only just come in contact. The Lord Buddha had disciples going back to when he had made his first conversions on the Dhammacakka day, but he didn't choose one of those 5 disciples, nor did he choose the disciples who attained arahatship during the first range retreat, nor the Kassapa brothers, but these new disciples, one who had only attained arahatship that night, and one who had only attained arahatship 1 week before, he named those 2 disciples as the chief disciples. Okay? That's what we remember on this night, but there is another part of it, and I can use it to conclude the story about Venerable Sariputta and Venerable Moggallana, because there's one other thing that took place on this night, which was that the Lord Buddha, at the end of his teaching career, when he was in Vesali, gave up the will to live. It's the Ayu Sankara. So at that time, he gave up the will to live, and he announced to Ananda on this full moon day, he announced to Ananda that within 3 months, it's 3 months to Vesak, in 3 months' time, he would pass into Parinibbana. So that's the other thing that we remember on this night. There are these 3 main things. Venerable Sariputta attained arahatship. The 1,250 disciples spontaneously assembled, and Lord Buddha gave up the will to live. Shortly after the Lord Buddha gave up the will to live, Sariputta announced his own parinibbana. So Sariputta and Moggallana predeceased the Buddha. Venerable Sariputta was in Savatthi, and Lord Buddha was in Savatthi at the time. And Sariputta announced his parinibbana. And he decided, his mother had, although he was an arahat, and had been an arahat for 44 years at that time, his mother had not attained path and fruit. So he decided to go back to his home, to the house where he had been born, actually, in Nalanda. So now Nalanda is very famous university and everything. The reason is because of its close association with Venerable Sariputta. It's Nalanda was the place where Sariputta was born, and it's also the place where he attained parinibbana. So because of that, and because of Sariputta's great skill in preaching the Dhamma, when they founded a university, one of these great universities during the medieval times, they founded it at Nalanda. That's why it's at Nalanda. Okay. So he went back to Nalanda, and his mother was there. And there's a nice story. I always like to tell a nice story. So there's a nice story about Venerable Sariputta. He went back to the actual room that he had been born in, and his mother refused to look after him. She thought that he'd come back to the lay life, but he had not come back to the lay life because he came home, you see. So she thought he'd come back to the lay life, and she refused to look after him. The gods, seeing that Sariputta had nobody to look after him, came down one by one. First Sakka came down, and Sariputta had dysentery. This is what he was dying of, right? So Sakka took all the stools and cleaned out the pot, right? And then, cleaned up the sheets and everything like this. And then he went back to went back to Tavatimsa, and then a higher god came down, and they looked after Sariputta, and then the Brahma gods came down, and they also looked after Sariputta. And then his mother got the idea, you know. I thought, all these gods are looking after my son. He must be somebody really special, like this. So then Sariputta was able, because she eventually gained faith, Sariputta was able to give some teaching to his mother, and his mother attained Sotapanna. So, you know, I think you know about this anyway. It's said that you cannot repay your parents for what your parents have done for you. Because when you're young, your parents looked after you, and you think, you know, Saka comes down and looks after your stools, but your parents come down and look after your stools when you're a baby also. Yeah. And then they're not highly developed gods and everything like this, you know, they're just ordinary people, but they clean you up and look after you and everything, and then they give you an education, and they bring you up properly and show you the right way and introduce you into proper practices. There's no way you can repay your parents, is what is said, but there is one way you can repay your parents, and that is if you bring them into the Dhamma. Yeah. So if you've got recalcitrant parents, don't give up on them. Even on your deathbed, you might be able to bring them into the Dhamma, okay, like Venerable Sariputta did. But Venerable Sariputta died at that time, and his relics were actually taken to back to Savatthi, and then they were interred. The Lord Buddha told to make a chaitya, so they interred those relics. Yeah. Later, those relics were divided, and some of those relics, and Moggallana's also, some of those relics were taken to Sanchi. You might know about Sanchi Stupa, right? And they were buried at Sanchi. And 2,500 years later, they were found. And they're actually, you know, almost certainly genuine relics of Sariputta and Moggallana. And when they found the caskets, those caskets had not been outside that stupa from the time that they had been put in the stupa. So for 2,500 years, they had been kept there. But those relics, by everybody, scientists, historians, or whatever like this, everybody believes those are genuine relics of Sariputta and Venerable Moggallana. So everybody say sadhu.
In the forest dense and wild, providing shade for fierce and mild, beloved by both man and child, the holy Bodhi stands. In the city's sun-brown heart, where the highways meet and part, beneath whose shade the sparrows dart, the holy Bodhi stands. Down the river's fertile shore, where young meet for Dhamma's law, enshrined within a pilgrim door, the holy Bodhi stands. Years by thousands have gone by since that Indian prince did sigh, and where became the Buddha high, the holiest Bodhi stands.
We have already given a brief introduction to the Jataka stories, which are recollections of some of Buddha's previous lives when he was known as Bodhisattva. Bodhisattva means one who strives hard to serve all beings selflessly. These stories are excellent sources of motivation that can guide us in the right direction on our path to success. Please encourage both children and adults to read these stories and watch their programs. They will surely help guide them towards success. Now, here is another wonderful Jataka tale. Mahakanda Jataka tale.
การันทิยชาดกครั้งหนึ่งในพุทธกาลสมัยยังมีเรื่องราวอันเป็นเหตุให้ต้องเลือกบอกศีลสั่งสอนธรรมะแก่ฆราวาสผู้ครองเรือนขึ้นในพระเชตวันอารามหลวงแห่งสาวัตถีเพื่อไม่ให้ภิกษุสงฆ์กระทำสิ่งอันเหลือวิสัยนั้นปฐมเหตุเรื่องนี้เกิดขึ้นในกรุงราชคฤห์ซึ่งพระสารีบุตรเถระได้เจริญธรรมสั่งสอนศิษย์และโปรดชาวมคธอยู่ที่นั่นพระธรรมเสนาบดีมีเมตตาสูงจึงให้ศีลแก่ชาวเมืองโดยไม่ได้เลือกชั้นวรรณะที่สำคัญคือท่านไม่ได้เลือกอาชีพของผู้คนเหล่านั้นเลยคนไร้คุณธรรมเช่นนักพนันและนักเลงดุร้ายจึงปฏิเสธการรับศีลจากพระสารีบุตรไม่ได้
ก็เพราะเคารพและเกรงใจท่านนี่แหละเลยยอมเสียสละแล่เนื้อกวางเลยนะเนี่ย
ข้าเองก็เหมือนกันหยุดหาเรื่องชาวบ้านมาฟังธรรมจากพระเถระเกรงใจท่านอุตส่าห์มาโปรด
ภิกษุสงฆ์ในสำนักท่านรู้ว่าคนเหล่านั้นรับศีลแล้วไม่รักษายังคงทำบาปกรรมอยู่ต่อไปจึงไม่อาจนิ่งเฉยได้
พระคุณท่านเหล่านั้นเขาไม่ได้รักษาศีลดังที่รับศีลไว้เลยนะขอรับ
แต่นี้ต่อไปขอพระธรรมเสนาบดีจงหยุดให้ศีลแก่คนผู้ไม่พอใจรับอีกเลยพวกพรานใจบาปนักเลงหัวขโมยพวกนั้นไม่อาจขัดขืนถ้อยคำพระเถระเจ้าจึงรับศีลไปแต่จิตใจมิได้ยอมรับตามเลยแม้แต่น้อย
ศิษย์ทั้งหลายของพระสารีบุตรกล่าวขอแก่ท่านอยู่ดังนี้หลายครั้งแต่ไม่ได้ทำให้การศีลหยุดลงแต่ประการใด
ไม่เป็นไรหรอกรับศีลไปทุกวันสักวันหนึ่งเขาก็คงประพฤติปฏิบัติศีลได้เอง
พระเถระผู้เลิศทางปัญญายังคงมีเมตตาบอกศีลแก่คนทั่วไปอยู่เช่นนั้น
จงเป็นคฤหัสถ์รักษาศีลปฏิบัติพระธรรมของพระผู้มีพระภาคเจ้าเถิด
เจ้าข้าเจ้าข้า
เมื่อสงฆ์สาวกจาริกมาสู่พระอารามใหญ่เชตวันยังโกศลรัฐในการต่อมาเรื่องการบอกศีลแก่เหล่าชนผู้ไม่ต้องการศีลของพระธรรมเสนาบดีฝ่ายขวาก็เป็นที่โจษจันสันทนาการขึ้นในโรงธรรมสภา
อาตมาขอบิณฑบาตไว้แต่มหาเถระก็ไม่ฟังเฮ้ย
อันเมื่อความปรากฏต่อพระกันสมเด็จพระสัมมาสัมพุทธเจ้าณธรรมศาลาในพระเชตวันมหาวิหารพระองค์ก็ทรงมีพระมหากรุณาธิคุณตรัสว่า ดูก่อนภิกษุทั้งหลาย แม้ในการก่อนพระสารีบุตรนี้ก็เคยให้ศีลแก่ผู้คนที่ตนประสบพบเห็นแม้มิได้ขอศีลนั้นมาแล้วองค์พระศาสดาก็ทรงตรัสเล่าการันทยชาดกขึ้นดังนี้ในอดีตชาติหนึ่งยังมีบุตรพราหมณ์นามว่าการันทยะเจริญวัยขึ้นในสำนักอาจารย์ที่สาป่าโมกและแตกฉานสรรพวิทยาไตรเพศคัมภีร์พราหมณ์ตั้งแต่ยังหนุ่มการันทยะเป็นที่ไว้วางใจของอาจารย์ที่สาป่าโมกอย่างยิ่งต่อมาจึงได้เลื่อนอันดับเป็นอันเตวาสิกะคือเป็นหัวหน้าคณะศิษย์ทั้งปวง
หลักคำสอนนี้เป็นอย่างนี้นี่เองพระธรรมช่วยทำให้จิตใจเราสงบสุขได้แท้
ๆศิษย์ผู้นี้ยังได้รับความเมตตาให้ร่ำเรียนมนต์พิธีจนสามารถอ่านพระเวทเป็นเจ้าพิธีกรรมแทนอาจารย์อยู่เนืองๆเพราะในวัยชราอาจารย์ที่สาป่าโมกต้องการปลีกตัวจาริกไปในที่ต่างๆเพื่อบอกศีลแก่หมู่ชนนั่นเองและการออกไปบอกศีลแก่หมู่ชนนั่นเองก็กลายเป็นเหตุให้คณะศิษย์ซึ่งนำโดยการันทยะต้องขอร้องมิให้ท่านกระทำอีก
คนไม่มีคุณธรรมเหล่านั้นไม่ต้องการศีลหรอกอาจารย์โปรดอย่าให้ศีลแก่พวกเขาเลยคนเหล่านั้นเลี้ยงชีพด้วยการฆ่าสัตว์จับสัตว์และลักขโมยบางคนปล้นชิงทำร้ายผู้อื่นเขาจำใจรับศีลเพราะเกรงบารมีอาจารย์แท้
ๆเจ้าค่ะรับศีลเจ้าค่ะ รับแล้วไปล่าสัตว์ต่อนี่แหละชีวิตพรานอย่างเรา
แม้หมู่ชนบางคนจะยอมรับศีลอย่างตั้งใจสมาทานดังคำให้ศีลที่อาจารย์พร่ำบอกว่าจงรับศีลเถิดจงรับศีลเถิดก็เป็นเพียงแต่หน้าเท่านั้น
กระผมรับศีลเจ้าค่ะต่อจากนี้ไปก็จะประพฤติตามศีลที่รับไว้ขอรับไว้ก่อนอยู่ต่อหน้าอย่างนี้เนี่ยต้องรับกันไว้ก่อนละ
กระทั่งบางคนแม้งดเว้นอาหารเย็นถือศีลอุโบสถได้ก็เป็นเพียงคนน้อยนิดเพราะอาชีพของเหล่าชนทั้งหลายล้วนต้องเอาเปรียบเบียดเบียนผู้อื่นเพื่ออาชีพตนจึงมิอาจรับศีลได้จริงๆศิษย์ทั้งหลายเห็นดังนี้จึงกราบขอให้ท่านงดให้ศีลแก่ผู้มิได้อาราธนาขอเถิด
แต่การันทยะก็ผิดหวังเพราะอาจารย์ที่สาป่าโมกไม่ได้ตอบรับกลับยืนกรานจะให้ศีลแก่ทุกๆคนที่พบเห็นต่อไป
ไม่ได้หรอกการให้ศีลให้พรก็ถือเป็นงานของอาจารย์อยากให้คนเหล่านั้นรับศีลด้วยใจจริงของเขาสักวัน
การบอกศีลแก่คนทั้งหลายดำเนินไปไม่นานนักการันทยะก็สบโอกาสทำอุบายได้ในวันหนึ่งวันนั้นอาจารย์ที่สาป่าโมกต้องอยู่บูชาไฟในสำนัก
การันทยะเอ๋ยอย่ามัวแต่ห่วงเรื่องให้ศีลเลยเธอจงนำศิษย์ของเราไปทำพิธีกรรมในหมู่บ้านแทนอาจารย์เถิด
เมื่อการันทยะนำศิษย์ในสำนักไปทำพิธีพราหมณ์แก่ผู้อาราธนาไว้จบสิ้นแล้วขากลับได้เดินผ่านเชิงเขาอยู่จุดหนึ่ง
เหวลึกโอ้ดีจริงๆเรามีอุบายให้อาจารย์หยุดบอกศีลแก่คนทุศีลพวกนั้นแล้ว
พราหมณ์หนุ่มสั่งคณะศิษย์หยุดพักเพื่อคัดเลือกขอบเหวลึกได้จุดหนึ่ง
ตรงนี้แหละเหมาะที่จะทำตามอุบาย
ของการันทยะคือขนเอาหินน้อยใหญ่ทิ้งลงในเหว
ท่านการันทยะท่านเป็นอะไรไปแล้วขนหินไปถมลงเหวทำไมกัน
ลูกพี่เฝ้าไว้อย่าให้ถึงกับกระโดดเหวนะเดี๋ยวข้าจะรีบไปตามอาจารย์มาดูเฝ้าไว้ให้ดีๆล่ะ
ได้สิเจ้าก็เร็วๆเข้าเถิด
อาจารย์ครับศิษย์พี่เป็นอะไรไม่รู้ครับช่วยด้วยครับ
อีกไม่นานต่อมาอาจารย์ที่สาป่าโมกก็ถูกตามมาถึงปากเหวที่การันทยะกำลังถมหินลงไป
หยุดก่อนหยุดซะเถิดการันทิยะนั่นเธอเป็นอะไรไปหรือเหตุใดถึงนำหินลงไปถมในเหวอย่างนั้น
อาจารย์ศิษย์เพียงอยากให้เหวนี้ตื้นขึ้นจนราบเรียบเสมอแผ่นดินเท่านั้นเองขอรับจึงพยายามถมโดยการทิ้งหินลงไปหวังว่าสักวันก็คงจะทำสำเร็จ
ยากนักเจ้าการันทิยะเอ๋ยเจ้าคนเดียวทำอยู่ทั้งชาติก็ไม่อาจทำได้มันยากนักนะศิษย์เอ๋ยจงหยุดเสียเถิด
ถ้าเช่นนั้นก็เหมือนกันกับที่อาจารย์พร่ำให้ศีลแก่คนทั่วไปทั้งที่รู้ว่าไม่อาจช่วยทุกๆคนให้ยอมรับไปปฏิบัติได้ทั้งหมดอุปมาก็ดุจกันกับขนก้อนหินไปถมเหวกระนั้น
เช่นนี้นี่เองอาจารย์เข้าใจแล้วขอบใจเจ้านะที่คิดอุบายเปรียบเทียบขึ้นมา
ต่อไปอาจารย์บอกศีลเฉพาะสาธุชนที่อาราธนาขอใช่ไหมขอรับ
ดูก่อนการันทิยะเอ๋ยเราลืมสัจจะแห่งโลกไปข้อหนึ่งคือแผ่นดินนั้นมนุษย์ไม่อาจทำให้ราบเรียบได้ทั้งหมดชั้นใดเราก็ไม่อาจทำให้มนุษย์ทั้งหลายให้รู้จักเข้าใจอำนาจแห่งศีลได้ทั้งหมดชั้นนั้น
เมื่อครบวาระกรรมในโลกมนุษย์ครั้งนั้นพราหมณ์ทั้งหลายก็ไปจุติในพรหมโลกด้วยอานิสงส์แห่งศีลสุดท้ายแห่งกงล้อวัฏสังสารในพุทธกาลต่อมาอาจารย์ที่สาป่าโมกกำเนิดเป็นพระสารีบุตรศิษย์พราหมณ์ทั้งหลายกำเนิดเป็นพระภิกษุสงฆ์การันทิยพราหมณ์เสวยพระชาติเป็นพระพุทธเจ้า
Beneath whose shade the sparrows down the holy Bodhi stands down the river's fertile shore where young meet for Dhamma's law enshrined within a pilgrim door the holy Bodhi stands Years by thousands have gone by since that Indian prince did sigh, and where became the Buddha high, the holiest Bodhi stands.
Well, that ends today's program. If you have any questions or concerns, please contact us at info@buddhadhammatv.com. We work hard to share the noble, peaceful, and sublime teachings of the Buddha with you, and helping you pursue the spiritual path under his wisdom. Please encourage and support those interested in the rational and enlightened teachings of the Buddha. Thank you for watching. We believe our programs on the Buddha Dhamma TV will inspire peace lovers around the globe. Good night. Namo Buddhaya.